Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our final session in our Why, What, When webinar series, where we started with planning and we have worked our way all the way up until today, covering promoting and speaker prep, and now we will get to executing. So you've done all of the work, you're leading up to your live event, and it starts in just a couple of days. How can you make sure that everything goes smoothly? You capture that interactive time with your audience and then use that to improve your program going forward. My name is Lauren Crales. I'm the marketing strategist here at Colliver Technology Group, where we help teams cover execution gaps. And today we are going to dig into all of these things. If you have not used this platform before, everything you need is in that right-hand panel. So there's a chat there that goes just to me. So please ask me any questions, share feedback. And there's also a handout on that side where you can read our blog. And lastly, there will be a poll popping up there shortly. So, like I said, you're in the final days leading up to your event, and making sure that your speakers are prepared is the least you can do. So you've done the prep, you've sent as much as you can, but it doesn't hurt to send one final reminder the day before, a couple days before. Hey, just want to make sure that you have everything. So we will log in 15 minutes early, remind them of that and why, and share those slides, share the poll questions so that they're aware, and then make sure that you have some seed questions set aside too. So I know that we had touched on this previously, but it's important if you don't get interaction from your audience to have something for that Q&A, because if you don't, or if your speakers don't know those questions, they might not be prepared to answer them. So we really like to make sure that those are on standby. And why would we log in 15 minutes early? So this is something that helps navigate any technical difficulties, answer any last minute questions, and just it kind of gives you time to settle before an event. So the team will log in and maybe there'll be some nerves, but you can start talking about something else and everyone will relax, because if you remember on our previous session, we talked about your speakers being comfortable as being the top priority. And then lastly on this list, if you can, so this will depend on your webinar platform and what you're using. If you can have something that attendees can interact with if they log in early, that just really helps keep them engaged. It helps showcase you as an expert and a thought leader, and just gives you another opportunity to showcase something that your team is proud of. So this one, I know you can't really do much, but some you can have a video play, or you can have some resources that they can download, or even the chat will be up early. So as you'll see on this one, I prompted the chat. I said, thank you for joining. What is one thing you hope to take away from today's session? So if the audience replies to that and you get responses, then your speakers can kind of keep that in mind as they move through the content as well, to make sure that they are delivering the value that your audience showed up for. And that brings me to a poll as well. So I'm curious for this group of what causes the most stress or friction on your webinar on event days. So each of these components can be stressful if you are not prepared. So technical glitches, low live engagement. So if people aren't quite interacting, and handing off the leads and data to the sales and your CRM, is that something that can be stressful? Or lastly, speaker readiness and slide transitions. So that last one, hopefully, if you missed our last session, go back and watch it if that's the one that you select. And then technical glitches as well. So those can be tricky. So I think that the most stressful one is probably the technical glitches, because that can be hard to navigate. If you're running into that and there's not a good way around it, that's something that can put a lot of pressure on the speakers. They get caught off guard. The audience might not know if it's coming from their side or your side. And then as that program manager in the back end, it can be stressful to keep everyone calm and just do what you can with what you have. All right. So that brings us to our next piece. So today we're going to walk through the live event, post event, and the next event of your webinar. So it's important along the way to be collecting the data. And what I mean by that is you will use the information that you established in the planning phase to help with your next event. So it sounds silly, but if you can think of it as a cohesive circle of all of your content flowing and how can we plan for the next one when you're planning the one in progress, that is going to make everything just be on that exponential growth where things are just improving time and time again. So starting with the live event, like I said, you have a multiple components that you've established before you get to the day of. And then when it's time to hit that start button, make sure that your speakers have the least to worry about as possible, because you can keep them comfortable and you can keep them confident, your material is going to come across a lot more cleanly. So some speakers like to move their own slides. For others, that's something they don't want to worry about. So make sure you ask them that in the dry run, make sure you know who's owning what. And then I mentioned the chat prompting there. So that's something that you can use to help with the engagement component of it. And even the, like, where is everyone joining from? That can be helpful if you have geographical segments in your audience. So if you ask, hey, where's everyone joining from? And you know that your solutions vary state by state, country by country. Again, that's another piece of information that your speakers can rely on to make that content most relevant for the audience that is there with them live. And over on that right-hand side, that second bullet of verbally referencing polls and resources, this is one thing that we've seen be successful is when the speakers are engaging with the audience, not just amongst themselves or just presenting. If they can talk to the audience like they're there, it makes the conversation feel a lot more genuine and you'll get more engagement that way. So if the speakers, or if you're on the back end and you do like a housekeeping in the beginning, that's normally where some of this ends up, is tell people where the resources are, tell people about the polls and what to do when that comes up. Because if someone's confused, or maybe they haven't used your system before, they might log in and be worried that, oh, I don't want to touch anything. I don't know. Can they see me? Can they hear me? And the more that you can ease their mind, the more engagement you're going to get. So with the speakers prompting, this is something if you have a like internal recurring speaker or someone who's really comfortable with public engagement, is getting them to prompt the audience in a way that is like, oh, is that similar to what you guys are seeing? Give us a thumbs up if that resonates. Or what is something that you've seen be successful? And people can enter that in the chat, or if there's like other ways that they can signal to the speakers. It's something that, like I said, just grows a lot of value. And asking for hand raises is a little bit new, but it is helpful and your sales team will love you. So if you get to a certain topic and you're talking about a product or a service and you directly ask your audience, hey, check this box if you want to be contacted about XYZ. Check this box if you want to learn more about this topic. That can make those conversions crystal clear and your sales team will be like, oh, easy, I just reach out to them about this. And it makes it so much smoother, and those results are just crystal clean. And on the event platform, if there's any place to do it, cross promoting upcoming events is a way to limit the number of emails you're sending, or just get another channel in front of people who are already interacting with a webinar. So if someone logs into a webinar, they like to consume content that way, and they're more likely to register for your next event. Similarly to the post-event survey, you'll notice a theme throughout the session today is telling your audience if you want them to do something, and asking for things from your audience. You have them. They want to help. They want good content. So if you have a survey at the end, and keep it short, but you can ask them to rate the content. You can ask them what they want to learn more about, or what's something they wish was included. And then as we move forward, you'll notice I will ask you to look at those results, keep track of them somewhere, and make sure that you can go back to them when you're planning that next event to include them. And if you ask and people give you ideas, you have to deliver on them. So that's a piece of building trust with your audience, that if they are sharing something that they'd like to see and you can deliver it, please do that. And you'll see them continue to come back and engage even more over time. So that brings us to the post event. So we had the live event, you navigated through everything, and it's over. Now what? If you got questions that you weren't able to answer during the live session, make sure that you follow up with those. Again, that's a huge component of building trust, is if they ask you something, get back to them. So work with your speakers on that. That's something that can be overlooked because there's a disconnect there between that live event and then the post-event materials, perhaps. So I hope that you're sending follow-up emails. In those follow-up emails, share those related resources. If you can share something different than was on the console, that's going to be most helpful. And again, cross-promoting those events. Thinking of your program as a circle and how you can tie everything together is going to make it smooth. It's going to make it understandable from the audience perspective, and they're more likely to engage. We like to create a master spreadsheet for each event. And then I know I've shared this before, but a master spreadsheet for all the webinars. So if you've not downloaded our webinar program workbook, you can do that. That is going to be in the handout section here, and it is on our website, and that's where you can keep track of all of these things. But the master spreadsheet for each webinar is helpful because what we do is you'll have a tab for all of the attendees and registrants, and then subsequent tabs of exports containing the questions that were asked, any poll responses mapped to the individual, any survey responses, and like any other engagement within the platform. And what we like to do is we'll run a VLOOKUP in Excel, and we'll take each of those interactions, and they'll be their own column on those individual, on that master spreadsheet. So if John Doe attended the webinar, you will have information on one tab of your spreadsheet that contains if they attended, how long they attended, their email, title, company, all the general stuff. And then if they responded to polls, what did they say? What were each of their poll responses? What did they want to learn more about? What questions did they ask? And that's another way to make it super easy for your sales team and your SDRs to get the most out of the webinar, because I see all of those things come through being the program manager on the back end. But if that isn't passed along to the account team, then they don't have the insight, and that value is lost. So making sure to translate that to your team is going to provide much more impact. And having those VLOOKUPs mapped to the individual is going to just help make it a lot easier so they don't have to navigate something messy. And exporting that engagement and making sure that your engagement rate and all of those key calculations that we've talked about are in your master spreadsheet so that you can look back on the event and analyze trends. So that's what we're going to get to next. But making sure that those engagement details, like I mentioned, are shared with the sales team and also with your content marketing team, because each of those results can be another piece of content, or maybe there's a way that they can leverage a component of the video or different angles there. So that brings us to our next event. Once you've ran the webinar, you've done your initial reporting, now what? Now you're looking ahead and looking back at the same time. So here are the components that I would look at to spot trends. And this is for any type of reporting that you would be doing for your webinar and looking at those poll responses, webinar after webinar, trying to spot trends. Same for questions asked. If you have a quarterly cadence webinar or you have a recurring session, are there questions that keep coming up that maybe could be addressed in a different spot that aren't necessarily being taken care of up until they get to that webinar? You can look for topics. So if you see a webinar that performs really well and you see it a couple of times and they all are around the same topic, your audience would like more on that. And then looking at what types of resources they're downloading, and your event cadence too is something that you really need that 500-foot view, looking at the big picture of, oh, these two were pretty close together and both of the numbers are lower than just this one event that happened on its own in this month. So that one can be tricky to navigate, especially if you're moving multiple variables at once. And keeping in mind of your promotional tactics. So this is one that can be tricky to navigate, especially if you're working with a bigger team. There's a lot of promotions going out. So if you can keep track of those in that master spreadsheet of what you did, it's going to be easier to look back. We all think that we're going to remember when we made changes, but you're not. I like to look at my webinar tracking as, could someone else look at this data and know what's going on? Could someone else spot trends in what I have here? Because if there's a lot of conditional knowledge of, oh yeah, but we did this a little differently here, so that's why the numbers are lower, state it. Put it out there, because ultimately you want other people looking at the data. You want other people spotting trends that you might not see, because everyone has a little different perspective to bring to it. So that brings us to those last couple of the speaker interactions and live event tactics. So these are things to notice and carry into that next piece of your webinar series as well. All right. So I know that some of these might seem obvious, but they really do help if you can establish a baseline for your events, then you can iterate on them. So if you remember last time, I was mentioning that there's a way to do everything so that you know when to make changes. So that is what I have for that. And that brings us back to that webinar blueprint that I mentioned. On this screenshot here, you can see there's all the task mapping for the live event management and then post-webinar content repurposing. So it gives you a place to track if you want to share the video on YouTube, make social clips, create blogs, guides, infographics, or maybe there needs to be another webinar on that same topic if you got a bunch of questions. And so, like I said, you can download that on the handouts tab here or on our website. And that brings us to Q&A. So on that screenshot there is just a reminder of all the sessions that we covered. If you missed any of them, they are all on our Colliver Technology Group YouTube page. And I hope that you watch them, comment, let me know what you think. And then, so I have a couple questions here. One of them being, how do you handle tech glitches? So that relates to the poll that we talked about. And like I mentioned, being as calm as possible is step number one, and communicating with the audience in any way you can. If the audio and video is glitchy, send a chat and let them know, or that is going to be the cleanest way. Or sometimes in the Q&A box, depending on your tool, you can send like an answer to a question to everyone. And if that's the best way, then just be patient with them. And if there's a tech glitch for maybe just one speaker and it's not everyone, then I would say jump in or have one of your speakers call it out. So if you just keep acting like nothing's happening, it's going to be confusing for your audience, and then they're going to tell you, oh, we can't hear John. And if you know that, then like it's easiest just to address it and have someone say, hey, John, it sounds like we lost you. Are you back? Can you repeat what you just said? Something along those lines, to just put it out on the table so that your audience knows if it is just them or it's not just them, if there are technical glitches. And then another question, how many people should be behind the scenes? So this is a good one because it does vary per team, but it depends on the roles and what kind of responsibilities you have. Because your speakers, so those are not technically behind the scenes. They're back there, they can see stuff, but that I wouldn't count that in this count. So I would say max 2 people, and really only 1 should be necessary, because if everyone's doing something, no one's doing something. So if there's multiple people clicking around on the back end, it can cause confusion. There can be mishaps that happen. But if you just have one person who knows all the responsibilities, managing the details, answering the questions from the audience that are like, oh, is there going to be a recording of this? Or simple questions along those lines that aren't tailored to your subject matter expert, that's going to be the most helpful. If you have like a massive event and you're getting a ton of questions or anticipate a ton of questions, having a couple people back there could be helpful, but I would recommend making sure there's super clear swim lanes of this person's going to move the slides and launch the polls. This person's going to manage the attendee chat and the Q&A box. So I hope that helps. All right. So that brings us to the end of our session. I want to thank you all again. If you've been here or watched the previous sessions, or you just joined for this one, we really appreciate it. And if you could use some help with your webinar program or just have questions, my email is right there and our website's there with additional resources, and I would love to hear from you. So thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.